What if I told you there's a mountain in Greenland that could change who controls the future of electric vehicles, military tech, and the global economy? And it's not just about mining. It's about politics, independence, global power, environmental risk, and a legal battle so big it's basically geopolitical courtroom drama. Today we're breaking down the Kvanefjeld project and the nearby Tanbreez project and how Greenland became the center of a global tug of war. We're also going to answer the big questions everyone asks but never gets a clean explanation for. Like, why and what are rare earths? What does everyone keep bringing China in for? What's the deal with uranium? Why did Greenland basically hit the pause button on one of the biggest deposits on Earth? Why is Tanbreez moving forward while the Kvanefjeld project is stuck? And you don't need a geology degree. We're going to explain this like normal humans. But enough of the detail, but with enough detail that you actually understand it. So let's hop into this. Alright, a quick intro. My name is Andrew. I build tech, I love macro strategy, and I'm obsessed with explaining complicated systems like their readable source code. The channel here, Source Code Macro, our goal is simple. We break down big global stories, but we do it in a way that normal humans can actually follow. If there's a topic where your brain goes, I keep hearing about this, but I don't fully get it, that's us. And today's topic is perfect for that because rare earths are one of those things everyone hears about, nobody understands, and yet they're basically everywhere. And a heads up, we're never giving financial advice. This here isn't financial advice. Our other videos are not financial advice. We're simply doing a macro breakdown. Technology, politics, incentives, timelines, risks. If you want the truth, this is the kind of story where details matter more than opinions. So before Greenland, before mining, before politics, we need to answer the biggest question. Why do rare earths matter so much that countries are willing to fight over them? And I'm going to pretend to be the average viewer for a second. Or maybe I am the average viewer. Rare earths sound like a fantasy ingredient. Like something you mine with a pickaxe in Minecraft while fighting dragons. It sounds like a video game material. But rare earths are basically real-world cheat codes for modern technology. Here's the simplest explanation. Rare earths are elements in a group of 17 metals that are ridiculously good at doing very specific high-tech jobs. The biggest job? Making insanely powerful magnets. And those magnets are what make modern life move. And we aren't just talking about iPhone speakers here. The US Department of Defense has stated that we are dangerously reliant on China for the magnets in the F-35 Lightning II or the Virginia-class submarines. Each sub needs about 2,900 pounds of rare earth materials for sonar and quiet propulsion. If China turns off a tap on dysprosium, which they process about 99% of, those assembly lines stop. So it's not just green energy, it's essentially everything. Everything. If your world has motors, motion, speakers, sensors, or guidance systems, rare earths show up. Some quick examples are electric vehicles need rare earth magnets in their motors. Wind turbines, they use them too. Fighter jets and missiles, as mentioned above, they need them for the targeting and control systems. They're guidance systems that make sure they don't go to the wrong place and do the job they're meant to do when necessary. Smartphones, we use them in speakers, vibration motors, and sensors. And most importantly, or most growing currently at the moment, data centers and robotics are using them more and more every day. And if you've heard about AI, you know how AI relies on data centers, and we are just growing data centers like they're of the earth. And the two celebrity elements you will always hear are Neodymium and Praseodymium. And the two celebrity elements you always hear about are neodymium and praseodymium. These are the kings of permanent magnets. But here's the twist. They have really spicy ones. The ones that scare supply chain planners. The heavy, rare earths like dysprosium and terbium, because those help magnets stay strong at high temperatures like inside a car motor. So if you control heavy rare earth supply, you control the high performance version of the future. I can already hear in the comments somebody typing right now, why are we digging up the Arctic? I have 3 old iPhones in a drawer. Why can't we just recycle the rare earths we already have? It's the most logical question, and the answer is more frustrating. We can recycle them, but the math doesn't work yet. Right now, recycling meets less than 5% of the global demand. So why so low? Because of how we build things. The rare earth magnets in your phone, or EV, are often glued in, coated in other materials, or shredded into dust during the recycling process. Extracting them is chemically difficult and expensive. Plus, demand is tripling. Even if we recycled every single iPhone ever made, we still wouldn't have enough dysprosium for the EV revolution. We have to mine. There is no other mathematical path. So here's why this becomes geopolitical. China dominates rare earth processing and supply chains. It's not even close. A lot of other countries have rare earths in the ground, but controlling the supply chain is different than having dirt with minerals in it. Processing rare earths is hard. It's messy, it's expensive, it's chemically annoying. And China spent decades building the refining and magnet ecosystem. So when the West says we need supply chain independence, rare earths become a national security issue. And that's why Greenland matters. So why Greenland specifically? Why is everyone looking at this frozen triangle? For 3 reasons. 1, its location. Greenland is basically sitting between North America and Europe. It's a strategic Arctic hub. And the US has already major military presences there through the Pacific Space Base, which was formerly known as the Thule. The second reason, resources. Greenland has serious deposits of rare earths, zinc, graphite, and more. And the third is the independence pressure. Greenland is part of the Kingdom of Denmark, but has self-major rule. There's long-term political momentum toward independence and economic independence needs, aka revenue. And that's where these minerals come in. So Greenland is balancing a build an economy versus don't wreck the environment versus don't get bullied by superpowers mentality. So now I think with that background, we're ready to delve into the 2 projects that are the key of our argument here, the beginning of the divergence. So to begin, there's the Kvanefjeld, which was formerly known or locally known as the Kuannersuit. It's near the town of Narsaq in southern Greenland. This project has been hyped for years because it's massive. It's one of those deposits that makes investors drool. It contains rare earths, but it also contains uranium. And that's where things get geopolitically explosive. And we're not talking about a little bit of uranium. We're talking about enough that it triggers legal thresholds. Greenland passed a law that effectively blocks projects with uranium over a certain concentration. The key number that gets referenced is 100 parts per million at that threshold. Above that, your project is treated as uranium involved, and Greenland decided absolutely not. That's the Uranium Act dynamic that basically slammed the brakes on the Kvanefjeld project. The concept has begun as an open-style pit at the Kvanefjeld project with major processing, and the controversial part is the tailings and uranium byproduct. Local concerns have been extremely serious over radioactive contamination fears, tailings near local water sources, impact on the sheep farming, fishing, and local economy. And finally, something I believe we all relate to, the distrust of we promise you over everything. We will manage this safely and not let you down. And these concerns aren't theoretical. People in Narsaq have organized against it for years. There was also an economic insult added to the environmental injury. The plan wasn't to separate rare earths in Greenland. The plan was to ship a radioactive concentrate directly to China for final processing. So Greenland gets a hole in the ground in the radioactive tailings, but China gets the high value factory jobs? Exactly. Critics called it the export of value. And because the concentrate contained uranium, Shenji had to set up a specific joint venture with the China Nuclear National Corporation, or the China National Nuclear Corporation, just to legally import it. There was literally no way to send this rock to Europe. No Western plant was licensed to handle that level of radioactivity. So it's not just environmentalists. It's literally community identity versus industrial extraction. And that local political pressure became national policy. So let me build a timeline for you, because this story is basically events stacking like dominoes. Over many years, the company behind the project, through different names and different structures, advanced the deposit with studies and planning. But there's a massive plot hole in the mainstream news coverage. People assume that China stole this project. The truth? The West walked away and left the door wide open. We walked away. If we go back to the period between 2011 and 2017, rare earth prices had absolutely crashed. Western capital markets viewed Arctic mining as uninvestable. There was no return for the foreseeable future. The developers of the Kvanefjeld knocked on the doors in Europe and North America, begging, asking for money. The answer was met with pure silence. The only entity willing to write a check was the Shenji Resources, a Chinese national major. They bought it when the stock was low, securing about 12.5% stake, and crucially, the right to buy 100% of the rare earth output. So we can't really blame Greenland for taking the cash if the Western banks were ignoring them, right? It wasn't a hostile takeover. It was a lifeline during a capital vacuum. But there's a deeper layer here. The Chinese didn't just bring the checkbook, they brought the chemistry set. And this brings us to the sludge problem. If I can get specific for a moment on the sludge problem, because research mentions something called the silica gel problem, the gel here is the villain of the entire story. Both the Kvanefjeld and the Tanbreez deposits have rare earths locked inside complex silicate materials. If you pour standard acid on them, the rocks literally turn into unpumpable jelly. It clogs the entire factory. And this is where the geopolitical split happens. Kvanefjeld's solution was to use the Shenji proprietary Chinese technology to suppress the gel. That linked them inextricably to Chinese IP forever. And this is a spoiler for later. Tanbreez is solving it differently. Instead of Chinese chemicals, they're using a new dry digestion method developed with German universities that turns the silica into sand, not gel. So the chemistry basically dictates the politics. One method locks you into the Chinese partnership, the other keeps you open to the West. But back in 2016, Kvanefjeld didn't have the German solution. They had the Chinese solution. So the project became IP locked. You couldn't run the mine without this Chinese recipe. Greenland had periods of openness to uranium and projects of rejection. But in 2021, Greenland's politics shifted hard. A new government came in with a strong environmental platform, and uranium mining got shut down. The parliament passed restrictions that basically killed the project's path forward. And this is where Kvanefjeld becomes global news. The company behind it, ETM, Energy Transition Minerals, ended up in a massive dispute with Greenland and Denmark. They launched arbitration around 2022 after Greenland indicated the new uranium restrictions meant the project couldn't proceed the way the company had expected. Now here's the insane part. They've sought damages that have been reported upwards of $11.5 billion. That's not a lawsuit. That's a national level financial security threat. That's like somebody suing your entire country. Basically, it's also why this huge case study is about how investor-state disputes can collide with environmental policy. One of the most important updates in this whole story happened October 28th, 2025. A tribunal through arbitration in Copenhagen ruled that the dispute over the exploitation license decision itself must be handled by Greenland's courts, not arbitration. But the tribunal also indicated that certain claims, like breach of contract damages, could still be potentially processed later, depending upon the court outcomes. Greenland scored a huge win on jurisdiction, but the fight is not necessarily dead. It's kind of like a boss fight where phase 1 ends, but phase 2 might still happen. And there are reports and filings showing Denmark was pushed out as a party in parts of the process, tightening the case's scope. So the lawsuit story is now Greenland courts first, and then maybe more arbitration later. And ETM, the company suing Greenland, isn't just waiting for courts. They are playing hardball in Washington. In January, earlier this month, 2026, they hired Ballard Partners as strategic advisors. Does that name ring a bell? Well, it should, because they have deep ties to the Trump administration. The strategy is clear. Position Kvanefjeld as a Western asset that is being unfairly blocked and hope American pressure forces Greenland to settle the lawsuit and open the mine. So pause. Because people hear uranium and think it's abstract, this is a town story. Yes, Narsaq, the town mentioned earlier, is not a mining region in the way Australia or Nevada is. This is a place where people are thinking, this is my water, these are my kids, our land, and this is our food. A lot of fear is about tailings, transport, and long-term contamination. Kvanefjeld isn't a gold mine you can just clean up easily. Rare earths are processed using chemicals, and uranium as a byproduct multiplies the anxiety. So it becomes a social fracture. Jobs and development versus environmental risk. Independence and economics versus lifestyle preservation. Outsiders want our minerals versus we need the damn revenue. And Greenland's politicians have to survive elections under that pressure. Let me quick get a check-in from everybody right now. If you had to choose just on the knowledge you know, which would you side with right now? Opening up this Kvanefjeld project with the big deposits but high controversy? Or keep the mine closed because of the uranium, because of the processes and the chemicals, or the threat to the environment? Ban it, no exceptions. Let me know how you feel right now. No judgment. I just want to see how everybody thinks. Because in a moment, Tanbreez shows up like a cleaner alternative, and everything changes. Tanbreez is near the Karkatok, also in southern Greenland. This project is repeatedly described as one of the world's largest rock rare earth deposits. What makes Tanbreez different is the narrative. Instead of rare earths plus uranium, Tanbreez is positioned as rare earths, heavy rare earth mix, less radioactive issue relative to the Kvanefjeld project, and more compatible with Western supply chain goals. Now, Tanbreez uses eudialyte mineralization, which is technically hard to process, but not politically radioactive in the same way. To get technical for a second, the Tanbreez rock, like I said, is eudialyte. Unlike Kvanefjeld, Tanbreez has negligible uranium. And remember that silica gel I mentioned earlier? Well, Tanbreez is solving it differently. Instead of Chinese chemicals, they're using that new dry digestion method developed with these German universities that turns that silica into sand crystals and not the gel. This doesn't clog up the machines, which allows other people to step into this process. So, no uranium ban issues and no need for Chinese IP to stop that gel. Which is why we got an exploitation license in 2020 while the Kvanefjeld got blocked. So Tanbreez becomes the West's best shot for a Greenland rare earth win. And the business moves prove it. Reuters has reported major deal momentum around Tanbreez. Critical Metals Corp increased rights to push its stakes as high as 92.5%. They also signed LOIs and supply agreements tied to building a Washington Western processing chain. There's also reporting that the US lobbied to discourage a sale to Chinese interests. This tells you how strategic this is. Now here's where things really get source code macro. Rare earth success is not mine that rock. It's an entire pipeline. Mine the concentrates, separate the oxides, convert to a metal or an alloy, make magnets, and sell to automakers, defense, and tech. China dominates steps 2 to 4. So companies like Critical Metals are trying to stitch together a Western chain. But don't think this is about Greenland to the United States pipeline. The documents show a massive multi-continental web being spun to bypass China. Yes, there are agreements with the United States, but the big money is coming from the Middle East. Tanbreez's owner, Critical Metals Corp, has entered a joint venture with the Saudi Arabian conglomerate TQB to build a $1.5 billion, with a B, $1.5 billion processing plant. I know you're thinking $1.5 billion in Saudi Arabia. How is this connecting? The plan is to ship Greenland's rock to Saudi Arabia for refining, specifically to feed the US defense industry. Plus, they signed a deal with the Romanian nuclear facility to handle processing in Europe. It's a NATO plus Saudi alliance designed to create a supply chain that never touches Chinese soil. But we need to be honest about the price tag, because never touching Chinese soil sounds heroic, but it's also expensive. It really is. This is the concept of greenflation. Right now, China artificially suppresses the cost of rare earths. They subsidize the power, they ignore the environmental costs, and they use cheap labor. That makes your iPhone $1,000 instead of $1,500. So if we switch to a clean Western supply chain with union labor, strict environmental laws, and complex shipping routes, who pays the difference? You do. If we want supply chain independence, the price of EVs, wind energy, and electronics will likely go up. Security isn't free. We are effectively choosing to pay a sovereignty tax to ensure our fighter jets don't rely on our adversaries. Reuters has reported a 10-year agreement for Tanbreez concentrate supply into Reuters has reported a 10-year agreement for Tanbreez concentrate supply into U.S. government-funded facilities, or a government facility in Louisiana called UCOR. Pause on Louisiana for 1 second. We just spent 20 minutes explaining that Greenlanders don't want this processing because it involves radioactive tailings and toxic chemicals. Why would the people of Alexandria, Louisiana say, sure, bring the toxic sludge in here? This is the not in my backyard paradox. UCOR claims their new technology, Rapid SX, is cleaner and happens in a contained factory, not an open pit. But the optics are tough. We are essentially asking American communities to host the processing industry that ruined China's own groundwater to build it. If local communities in the United States start blocking these refineries for environmental reasons, the entire Western supply chain falls apart. You can't have magnets without a mess. The mess has to go somewhere. So this is the exact pattern. Secure the feedstock, secure separation capacity, secure downstream parameters and partners, and reduce China dependency. Again, it's not a Greenland to the United States pipeline. That's thinking too small. The source documents show that it's becoming a global anti-China web. Yes, there's the Louisiana connection, but Tanbreez's owner, Critical Metals Corp, has reportedly signed the stated above TQB deal, the $1.5 billion refinery that is to process Greenland's rock in Saudi Arabia, specifically to feed the U.S. defense industry. This is why Tanbreez is viewed as real political infrastructure, not just a mine. So let's talk politics, because mining is policy. Greenland had a major election in March 2025. Reuters reported that the Democrats surged victory, shifting the political center toward a more pro-business stance compared to the previous leadership style. But why the sudden shift back to pro-business? Did people just get tired of the environmentalists? No, they got tired of being broke. By late 2025, the Greenlandic treasury was running critically low on liquidity. The shrimp industry, which was 90% of their exports, was in decline. So when the mining election of 2021 was about saving the environment, the 2025 election was about saving the bank account. And that's why Prime Minister Nielsen is looking for revenue. Independence is expensive. Nielsen became the Prime Minister and formed a broad coalition. Now that doesn't mean Greenland flips instantly to pro-mining, but it does mean the conversation becomes more economically intense. Like, how do we fund independence? How do we build revenue? How do we control our own resources without getting colonized financially? And Denmark has also pledged to increase spending support for Greenland's infrastructure and healthcare in the 2026 to 2029 window. So now the island is caught between wanting sovereignty, needing money, managing foreign risk, and controlling environmental risk. So now we're in 2026 and the Arctic is heating up politically. We hear about it quite often now. And there's even an analysis describing a Trump-era posture being named the Don Roe Doctrine, reaching the Arctic, tied to pressure around Greenland's acquisition rhetoric. And just to make it even more chaotic, a third player has entered the chat: Russia. In 2025, Danish intelligence busted a Russian disinformation campaign specifically tied to break the US-Denmark alliance. So what were they doing? Classic chaos agent stuff. They used bot networks to spread fake stories, claiming Danish lawmakers were asking Russia for help to stop a US annexation. They even circulated doctored images. Russia doesn't use these mines, but they are actively trying to make sure that the West fights among itself while trying to secure them. And yes, this was literally a US bill introduced called Make Greenland Great Again Act. HR 361. Greenland's government has publicly rejected the idea of any takeover and emphasized that the defense should be supported through NATO structures. Denmark has also been increasing that Arctic defense focus, and Reuters reported upcoming NATO activity like the Arctic Endurance exercise. There's also the darker layer to this freedom narrative that keeps the Pentagon planners up at night. For some, in Greenland, Chinese investment wasn't about liking China. It was about funding independence. If China replaces the Danish block grant with mining revenue, Greenland can finally afford to leave the Kingdom of Denmark. Economic freedom sounds great on paper. It does sound great until you look at the military path. If Greenland leaves Denmark, then they lose the Danish and NATO security umbrella. And waiting in the wings is the Sino-Russian axis, Washington's fear that a newly independent Greenland, heavily in debt to the Chinese banks, would be coerced into hosting its partners. And since Russia and China are no limits partners, you can imagine how you don't just get Chinese miners. You potentially open the door for Russian dual-use ports, refueling stations, and even a legal military presence right next to North America. This is the Trojan horse scenario. You invite China for the cash, but you accidentally invite the Russian military for the stay. So rare earths are happening inside a defense storm. And now you understand why Greenland minerals are not just a mining story. They are a supply chain war inside a sovereignty question, inside a NATO security chessboard. So let's compare them cleanly. We have Kvanefjeld, which has a massive scale, rare earths plus uranium byproducts, heavy local controversy, uranium restrictions that hit hard, and huge legal disputes with Greenland and damages up to $11.5 billion. Over on this side, we have the Tanbreez project, which is a huge hard deposit. We have the Tanbreez project, huge hard rock deposit positioning. heavy rare earth angles, being wired into the Western supply deals, the US political interest in keeping it out of China's orbit, and Reuters reported supply chain agreements through Ucore and Realloys. So Kvanefjeld is the monster deposit stuck in legal and political hell, while Tanbreez is the politically easier we need this yesterday deposit. And that's the chessboard. We have to address the elephant in the room though. If Kvanefjeld is this monster deposit with high grades and easy processing, and Tanbreez is the cleaner alternative, isn't Tanbreez actually the worst mine? Geologically, it is. And it's the brutal truth nobody puts in the press release. Kvanefjeld is high grade. It has a lot of rare earth packed into every ton of rock. Tanbreez is lower grade. You have to mine more and grind more rock to get the same amount of metal. So in a purely free market, Kvanefjeld wins. Kvanefjeld would have been built 10 years ago. But we aren't in a free market. We are in a security market. We are intentionally choosing the harder rock because it is the safer rock. We are forcing Tanbreez to work, subsidizing it, building infrastructure for it, because it is literally the only geopolitical option that we have left. It is the backup plan that has become our only plan. Right now, I want to know your opinion. Comment below. Greenland should go full resource powerhouse, fast track mining, and become independent through its mineral exports? Or you believe that Greenland should stay conservative, protect the environment, avoid becoming a pawn, and be building things slower? Or option C, because I believe we always need to be abstract and think about the options that they or we aren't thinking about. The middle path. This middle path, though, requires insane governance and transparency between all parties involved. Let me know below, what do you choose? Why can't everyone, though, just mine rare earths and win? Because rare earth processing is like trying to separate a bag of glitter by color after you dumped it into pancake batter. It's a separation nightmare. That's chemistry, acids, solvent extraction, waste management, and insane quality requirements. And if you mess it up, you don't get rare earths. You get unstable sludge. So the winning strategy isn't own the mine. Again, it's own the entire pipeline. That's why the Western push is all about building the separation plants, locking those supply contracts, building magnet factories, and securing defense-grade supply standards. This is why Tanbreez deals matter so much more than the hype. So here's what we're watching as we continue forward and paying attention to this every day. There's several things, beginning with, 1, the Greenland court decisions tied to Kvanefjeld. After the arbitration jurisdiction decision, Greenland courts become the battlefield for exploitation claims licenses. Again, we also want to follow, 2, the Tanbreez financing and build timeline. The project's credibility will hinge on capital, infrastructure, and execution. We also want to watch 3, Western processing ramps. Through the Ucore facility timeline, Realloy, and others, and the scaling milestones that matter so much to the progress. We also want to watch for 4, these Greenland politics. If mining becomes the economic engine for independence, policy will keep evolving. And finally, those US NATO Arctic pressures. Greenland has explicitly pushed for the defense framework towards NATO, rejecting unilateral takeover rhetoric. So before we go, I want to go over several quick questions that I believe people will be asking down below in the comments. So I'm going to take 10 seconds for each one, and I'm just going to go ahead and answer it. Can I buy stock in Tanbreez? Right now, no, not directly. It's privately held. But the companies around it, like Critical Metals Corp, are the ones making the deals. So watch the SPACs and the partners, not just the mine. Question 2. Will China just crush the new guys by dropping prices? They damn well will try. They did it in 2010, but this time, Western defense contracts might put a price floor under the market. The US military will pay a premium to keep the lights on. Third question. For anyone that's heard about it, there's also another byproduct called thorium. So what about thorium? Everyone asks this. Yes, Greenland has massive thorium energy potential. But until the world embraces thorium nuclear reactors at scale, it's just that, potential. Right now, it's a waste rock, not a fuel source. Number 4, if Greenland goes independent and invites China in, does the US invade? Invade? Probably not. But strongly discourage with an aircraft carrier parked off the coast? Maybe flyovers? Absolutely. The US brought the Virgin Islands to keep Germany out. Invade? Probably not. But strongly discourage with an aircraft carrier parked off the coast? Absolutely. The US bought the Virgin Islands to keep Germany out. They offered to buy Greenland twice. They will not let the Arctic become a Chinese parking lot. So what is our final message here? The final message is Greenland is not a resource chest. It is a real place with real people, a real ask, and real politics. Kvanefjeld shows us what happens when a project is too controversial to survive democracy. Tanbreez shows us what happens when the world needs a supply chain so badly it starts wiring deals into existence. And the next era of power is going to be decided by boring things like processing plants, permits, elections, courts, and shipping logistics. And we'll follow every single update. So the future isn't science fiction, it's contracts and chemistry. If you want more breakdowns like this, subscribe. And if you want us to turn this into a 2-part where we map out who wins under each scenario, tell us in the comments. Should we go deeper into China's rare earth supply chain control, the exact US processing capacity plans, or even Greenland's independence economics? Thank you guys. See you in the next one. Thank you for listening. Hope we answered some of those questions and get everybody on track. Thank you. Have a good day.